Thank you very much, Christopher. San Jose Chiapa, San Luis Potosi, the same color what I have now, the blue one, but it's still a different brand. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Koltai. It's not the first time that I am on the stage, but somehow I am now a little bit nervous, so I hope that I will not make many mistakes. I would like really to summarize everything what we have heard in the first two sessions. It was not set up and it was not planned like that, but actually you will see it, that all what we have heard will turn up also in my presentation. I am in charge of the production control and logistics of Volkswagen in Mexico since the 1st of January. And coming from Europe after 2 years of pandemics and semiconductor crisis, where we were really restricted also or personal freedom and all the chaotic industry what we had behind us, I thought it's over. I come over to Mexico again and I will have a quiet job because the pandemic and the crisis is over. Well, I had to learn it very quickly that it was very naive to think like this. And I also had to find it out very quickly that we don't need a stronger logistics, but what we need, and all of you need a strong logistics to accelerate Mexico's recovery. Otherwise, we will not cope with all the challenges what we have. First of all, I would like to have a wrap up for all the influencing factors that we have. Not only us, but all of you. It's not a rocket science, I'm just summarizing it, but you also know. And I'm trying to give you a little bit of an overview about that. How does it impact us? So first of all, COVID, I cannot even hear it, but we had it, and it has caused a lot of loss of production. We have seen it also before at us in our factory at Volkswagen in Mexico. Some 10,000s between 2020 and 2022. After a certain of time, it was pretty difficult to make a deviation or to make a change. What was it? Was it COVID now or was it semiconductor, which has also caused a very high amount of loss of production, more than 20% of our production plan in 2021 and 2022. This nasty war in Europe, it has caused also for our business to manage the supply chain a huge impact. And this was with increased cost. And just an example, from one moment to the other, the air freights went up to nearly 200%. And it's not enough. You are really thankful and happy if you get any place on a plane to get something over the ocean. Who is not nervous because of Taiwan and China? We have heard it also before, how big dependency our industry has from Taiwan. And this uncertainty, it made again increased costs. So what we have seen in the last years, the transportation cost in average, 15%. And that's already, if you have achieved that, I think you can be really happy and thankful that you had really good contracts. The transportation situation in the globally, you have seen a huge lack of capacity, which also again increased the costs. And then if you look at the maritime, it's at least 60% in average. Then we have the continental influencing factors. It means the North American region. And first of all, the inflation rate. Again, it caused increasing the costs. And then what we see statistically, 8.2% annual inflation rate, which was reported in October in 2022 so far. Lack of drivers. What is the result of that? You receive for sure lower service degree in your transportation, and then many times it comes to production interruptions. And then you can see that many drivers from the Mexican market, they are going in the direction of the US. We had also some border control issues, delays in the transportation, and then again it caused production disruptions. What we see at the end, that the total industry is somehow getting with less players, and then we have less competition. And it drives to that the service level is decreasing and the costs are already increasing. Only an example from our one, the last tender what we gave out, we had only 2 technically approved offers. Then the future, electrification. In the US as well, in the Europe we knew it already earlier. It is a game changer, also in the logistic. It changed the future master plan of all our logistic operations. And another game changer, which is also getting stronger and stronger in the North American region, this is the sustainability, and that we have to comply with the CO2 requirements. And then let's have a look at the Mexican influencing factors. Crime, insecurity. At the end, if a truck is kidnapped from you, very certain that you will have some production interruption or service limitations. We are observing, unfortunately, an increasing number of kidnapped trucks in total, and that gives us a lot of worry. We have also service limitation. Many times we are not able, for example, to start some routes to the US on Friday because nobody is ready to take or load on Friday because they say it's unsafe. They will start first on Monday when they know that they can drive through, do not have to stop anywhere, and they can do it only in daylight. Then the supplier base. 2 years of pandemic also in Mexico, that has shown us that many of our suppliers are in a not very good shape. And what happens? We have production interruption. I would say I have too many surprises as a head of logistic, and that's not really what we want. Approximately 20% of our suppliers in Mexico, in the Northern American region, are on a so-called warning list where I know any of them could stop at us any day. What I also see that the restriction, the capacity restrictions which we have on the road, we are struggling really to have a competition between rail and road. They are major capacity restrictions, and then that's why we have a very low competition possibility in these 2 transportation modes. But not everything is bad, and I would like really to say 2 very positive things. That's why you have the red heart there. Veracruz. The port of Veracruz, I'm talking now about material, the containers, had a very stable operation in the last time, 24/7, and we are highly appreciating it. This is absolutely state-of-the-art. As long as you can hear that all the East Coast ports from the US or the European ports are causing a lot of waiting time, in Veracruz, it's running everything pretty well. Thank you for that. And the other one, which is one of the major reasons why I love to work in Mexico and to live in Mexico, this is the flexible and motivated employees. This is incredible, how quickly and how flexible problem solving is running. This is unique, and we really take a lot of advantage out of it. Okay, I am representing Volkswagen now here, and I would like to show you who are we exactly.
Our history began more than 80 years ago. We created emotional cult cars, and we moved people. Since then, our customers discovered the world with our products by their side. Today, we are one of the world's leading automobile manufacturers, with over 660,000 employees globally and 10 strong brands. To come, the future of cars, the future of individual mobility will be bright. Our promise: With electric drives, digital connectivity, and autonomous driving, we are making mobility emission-free, safe, and convenient. Our strategy, New Auto, will transform us into a software-driven mobility provider. Mobility will be a desirable new experience. We are ready for this new auto world.
And we have a compromise for Mexico. But first of all, what you might know about the North American region of the Volkswagen Group. As a biggest or second biggest OEM of the world, we have not so many production facilities as other of our competitors. We have 6 different segments on 3 vehicle production sites. We have Volkswagen Chattanooga with 2 segments, Volkswagen Puebla with 3 segments, and Audi Mexico with 1 segment, Audi San Jose Chiapa. And we have an engine plant in Silao, and we have other Volkswagen brands here in the North American region, Navistar and Volkswagen Camions and Omnibuses. What you might know about Volkswagen in Mexico. This is the 2nd biggest Volkswagen factory in the world. Wolfsburg is the biggest, 2nd biggest is Puebla. We have a top-paying, or we are a top-paying OEM in Mexico for our workers, for the blue collars, and we have a very loyal workforce. The average of the technicians is 20 years, and the average of our white collars is 15 years of service. We have suffered a lot in the last 2 years. We have lost a high rate of production volume. We are as a mass manufacturer, and it was very strongly to be filled. But we have huge development opportunities for the North American region. This is also because of the orientation of our Volkswagen Group and the new strategy which has been decided for this OEM. What are we doing? How we are using synergy and growth potential in the North American region? First of all, it's very important, we try to take over all the technology from Europe and China, what we have in the Volkswagen Group, to take the processes and know-how from all these areas, and we would like to take over the high experience in production as well, what we have in our global production areas, in Europe, in China, and the rest of the world. And we are in a clearly transformation process into the electric vehicle era. How does our logistics of Volkswagen Mexico react on the challenges? I can tell you, we really do things that no OEM would have done 5 years ago. It's crazy. We have increased the flexibility extremely. First of all, we are now manufacturing many times vehicles which can be produced in taking into account what kind of shortage we have. Earlier it was clear we build that what the customer wants. Now we build that for what we have material. We have to prove all the time what is the buildability, which parts they are available, and then we change our programs and we start to have a production out of it. We are making empty supply chains, what we have never done before. We are setting up new routes without having a security plan behind it. And this all reactions, and this is only reaction, has mainly influenced that we can operate and we do not have to stop production. What can we do even better in the future? First of all, we need to use in a much higher degree, or synergies in the NRL region. We have Volkswagen, Audi, Navistar, we have camions and buses. We have to use everything what we have together. We have to go over in a modus where we are acting instead of reacting. I have explained to you some of the biggest problems. One of them, our supplier base. We are following up daily every signal from our suppliers, beginning of the amount of stock, then the waiting time of our trucks at the supplier, all the signs what we get from the suppliers that they are really critical for us. We are trying not to make a lot of program changes, and from all the impacts what we have, we really put through into the direction of suppliers only the absolutely must, the minimum. Some of the suppliers might sit here, they should say, or they might think, Jesus Christ, if that's the minimum, then how many impacts they could have? A lot. I can tell you really daily 15 to 20 impacts which would drive for that to change the program. And then we are safeguarding also our suppliers. Many people from us, they are on the side of them, and we try to help them together to get on the right path. Localization. The globalization is not that anymore what it was. The prices went up. There is a trend that you cannot really account on all the global transportations. We have delays, high delays. We have problems with the capacity. So the only thing what helps, get as much as possible into the Mexican region. Then the next one, we have to speed up how we work, the breaking down of hierarchies. In the logistics of Volkswagen and Mexico, we have started a project and a way of working where we are taking over and crossing over all the hierarchies. We get all managers together, all our talents, that they are really a backbone of the logistics, and we work with them together across our departments and every major point and every major process or project where we are working on a solution for our biggest problems. We call it circle of trust, and then we use here really the flexibility and all the commitment of our employees. And believe me, if you give to your employees the freedom and the empowerness, they are like Superman. Then, one important point, Mexico and clean energy, possible clean energy. I don't know any other country on this earth who has so good preconditions for clean energy usage and clean energy production as Mexico. We believe that it will be also a very important part of the Mexican economy and that many other countries will take advantage out of it. I have discussed, or I have already appointed, that we have some problems to use a change between rail and road. This is something what we are pushing stronger, where we are searching for solutions, searching for infrastructure, but I believe that it will be for the future a very important point of us for the material and also for the car logistics. Then a transparent and simple supply chain with early warning. The general explanation for that is control tower, but the control tower function starts there, that you have a visibility or a transparency about that, what is happening in your supply chain, but it can go up to there that you really make predictions according to that, what news are coming up or what is the weather forecast. And there is a long path to that, and this is a very difficult project. We are also at the very beginning of this, but absolutely a future spotted important project for us. And at last but not least, take over all the technologies from Europe as soon as we can. We save money and we save time. As at many OEMs, the most of the resources for development and for researchers are in the centrals. In our case, this is in Europe, and that's why it's very important that we try to take over all the technologies from there. There are some difficulties because in Europe the measures are different than in North America, and in the logistics it makes something out of it, but we are working on that and we have good examples for this, that it can work very well. In total, I hope that you have received a good overview from me, what are our problems and how we are trying to handle with it. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm excited now to introduce our other experts who will join us for the discussion. Our first expert has worked for Tier 1s since 1999, joining Continental in 2012 and has led various supply chain logistics roles, including head of plant logistics and supply chain for a major plant in Brazil. She recently took over as head of supply chain North America for the division Contitech for Continental. I'm very pleased that Roberta Palacio could join us here today. So Roberta, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Please. Our next expert has spent about 18 years in logistics, including 10 years in the automotive industry, expert in all things EDI and API and logistics digitalization. He's been building up quite a team of experts here in Mexico focused on automotive and has recently taken a role building up a control tower. Interesting reference there from what Peter took, a control tower for North America. Very pleased to welcome Honorio Rodriguez from Hellmann Worldwide Logistics. And last but certainly last least, our next expert joined Maersk some 15 years ago and has held roles with increasing responsibility across sales, commercial, and operations. Earlier this year, she became the managing director for the Middle Americas regions, responsible for Maersk divisions across there. And so we're really pleased that Patricia Pérez can join us here today. Gracias and welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, so we'll spend the next half an hour or so going through some topics together. And again, questions from the audience will be welcome. But I want to kind of first start talking about investments in Mexico and the development path that Peter outlined. We know that both Volkswagen and Continental recently announced some big investments in Puebla, in fact, and for Mexico. And I just want to start with you, Roberta, in terms of understanding the role logistics will play in supporting those investments and growth.
Okay, so Continental is opening a new factory in São Luís Potosí for industrial hoses, and it's aiming to improve and support the industrial growth in Mexico. And as supply chain, it's very exciting to support a new investment in a country because we participate just to build the factory, how to bring things in there and then start a running operation. So I think supply chain is logistics role is totally important to make it run and to get in there and achieve the implementation.
Great. And Peter, in Puebla, there's I think new models coming. We've also seen an announcement that an EV will come. I think was 25 or 26. What again, you outlined a lot about the challenges that you're facing, but how do you see logistics supporting this next phase in Volkswagen's development in Puebla?
We have announced $740 million investment. This is for the period until 2030. And this is a new paint shop and the preparation and the introduction of electrical vehicles. With the electrical vehicles, this is, as I have said also in my presentation, it's a game changer in the logistics. We have some new challenges, and then for this one we have to prepare ourselves to transport and to handle batteries, high voltage batteries. It's something completely different what we have today in a combustion engine production area. And then also at the beginning we thought that an electrical car might be less complex than a combustion engine car, but until now we don't see any track of it. So the complexity is even increasing, and that's why for all these processes we have to be prepared, and all the factories has to be set up with new layouts, with new investments.
So as Peter outlined, and as we've just heard from both Continental as well, the logistics are going to play a really, really important role. And we've heard from Peter as well that there's not always the competition and availability of supply that perhaps everyone wants. So I think we're also very keen to understand where you're investing and focusing on growth in Mexico and the region. So I want to start with you, Honorio.
Well, our main focus is Hellmann, not only Mexico, but globally, the digitalization, our TMS, and trying to connect with the customers through EDI, API. I mean, it's, at this point, it's pretty interesting that we still find some tier ones, big companies that we're still working with spreadsheets. And I feel like 20 years ago when I started working, and I would get some email from Europe, and they would send me as well a fax. And I would see in the morning all the papers printed. And now I feel like that when you have the possibility to do EDI, API, and there's still some planning departments asking for these spreadsheets, like just in case, like that at the time with the fax. So for us in this world of data science, which Peter was mentioned, they're on daily basis or weekly basis measuring a lot of data. It's important that you automate most of it. So that's part of our main investment as well on the our team, training our team. Peter mentioned it, control tower. So that's what we are focusing right now.
Great, and Patricia from Maersk, obviously you have huge investments on the ocean side, but obviously also building up many other services too. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about where you're investing?
Certainly, Chris. So Maersk 4 years ago decided to walk the path from shipping line into global integrator logistics suppliers, and that is going to be our North Star towards investments. So if I want to answer that, the investment will come in 3 buckets. It will come on infrastructure, it will come on product development, and it will come on the back of IT. First and foremost, on the infrastructure, we have a terminal operating in Lázaro Cárdenas, another one in Progreso, but we're cognizant that on that side of the business, we need to expand the port operations to make sure that the international transportation is fully matched with the needs on the national logistics and so on. So that is one of element where we're going to expand out of not only these 2 terminals, but the port operations, and alluding to what Peter mentioned earlier on Veracruz being very efficient, we also want to contribute with accessorial services alongside port operations to make those connections and provide those efficiencies. We're gonna expand as well on the warehousing business, so we're gonna go into an incremental of 150,000 square meters in Mexico, and with a lot of focus on the north side of the country on cross-docks to make sure that we're also connecting with the cross-border operations. In terms of product development and capability coverage, we recently acquired 2 companies, Pilot, which is a last mile company, more prominently on the US, but it has operations in Mexico, and also Senator, which is an auto-driven company, very specialized on air services. So connecting also with the air transportation, it's super critical for us, and this will highly complement on the automotive vertical. And then last but not least, on IT, I echo what Honorio was mentioning. We need to go into digitalization, into automation, and that is being supported by our own developments on supply chain, control towers and technology behind to operate these orchestration around supply chain, but also on the technology behind blockchain. So that's something that we are heavily investing, and that's going to be our North Star for the next 5 years in the country.
Great, so both providers putting a lot of focus on digitalization, not via fax, I'll add, but so a lot of efficiencies to create, as well as investing in let's say, boots and assets on the ground. I want to pick up on something else Peter mentioned. Peter mentioned extreme flexibility, doing things no one would have imagined doing 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I'm just interested to hear from some of the other panelists on how they've been responding or reacting to this flexibility. So Roberta, again, coming to you, do you recognize that for Continental? What are some ways you've had to really change the way you operate to stay so flexible?
Yes, completely. And I can say being in the other side, we see this flexibility as good, because in the past the relation OEMs and Tier 1 was like a kind of power over us, and then we have a much more communication, we have a much more cooperation. We have to look, okay, so what can you produce, and can I be flexible in change and help you to go to that? So it changed completely the relation, but I see as positive for marketing and growth together.
So that, I've heard a lot of things like, kind of almost war room style kind of management of the supply chain piece by piece, lane by lane. I'm sure that's not the way you want to do it in perpetuity, but that increased communication and visibility certainly has advantages to build on. And I want to come to you on that as well, Honorio. How as a 3PL, as a logistics provider, how have you had to change the way you operate with your customers and with your partners to enable that?
Well, indeed, it's a cascade effect. If the OEM is not pushing too much Roberta is not pushing me that much, right? But definitely there is a very positive change between the relationship of the 3PLs and the customers in the auto industry. This flexibility is helping. Now it's more of a partnership. And we see a lot of customers, and we both, the 3PL and the customer, learned the lesson, and now we see less of those customers doing transactional business, like thinking, I'll give you this lane, that lane is spreading all around, and then when we have the capacity issues, you had no partnership with no one. And so that is now changing. I think we should take this momentum and still work together as a team with the customers in regards of now thinking of for the forecast and the planning. It was like a cycle planning, and I think now with all the data that we see in the previous talks, it's more of a continuous planning rather than a cycle planning. And customers should acknowledge some facts as well, because we work on a very predictable and advanced forecasting during the COVID crisis, which was very helpful. But still, customers need to acknowledge that some things happen, like port emissions, blank sailings, and we are now very predictive with 6 weeks in advance, and the decision making is still taking those 4 or 5 weeks, and later you're paying like really high premium air freights instead of acting quickly on those previous 4 weeks or routing, going for those contingency plans. You are doing the contingency plan in the last minute. So those are the things that still can be improved. And again, partnership. When you partner for long term, in the past it was like 6 months, 1 year contract, and there is no chance for us, for 3PL, to implement our continuous improvement to drive through savings and so on. Another thing, lastly, because I'm just extending too much, pre-COVID, I would go to my customers and offer some alternatives for improvement and savings, and they would say, yeah, that's overseas, and this is like the less part of my problem. My big problem is cross-border, so we'll talk about that later. Unfortunately for you guys, fortunately for us, now with this overseas and sea freight pricing, air freight pricing, now we have more attention than in the past. So those are the changes that we see in as a 3PL.
And Patricia, do you recognize this pre-COVID, post-COVID relationship? I mean, in the shipping industry, it was rather extreme, you can say. But from Maersk's point of view, and as you get deeper into those value-added services, how have those relationships changed?
I can say that our strategy proved very successful during COVID because we were able not only to tackle the commoditized part of ocean transportation, but a tap into value adding. If it can only triple the stress what Honorio was saying, that relationships have become more strategic and long-term. There is and will be so many shocks on the supply chain coming from demand and coming from supply as well, that you need to partner with your customers and really go long-term. And if you don't have that mindset and you stay with a very transactional, cyclical, and fragmented approach to negotiation, you're not able to really uncover what the pain points for the customer are, and then therefore create these contingency playbooks. And one of the learnings that we have in Maersk, because you would assume that the auto industry, it's all about just in time and it's all about accelerating inventories. Not only accelerating inventories, but slowing down. And that means that all the companies cannot be on the same situation. It depends on how customers can read demand, how they can react to demand, to supply shocks. And that type of conversation, it's not something that is going to happen through a tender. It's something that requires constant communication. It's something that requires constant planning, and the planning, you cannot even separate, because it's so intertwined, the plans that you need in order to be a trusted strategic ally to your customer, that I can simply relate to what Honorio, you need to go long term, you need to have a strategic mindset, and you need the customers to open the door for us to really understand what's cooking behind, to be able to support with tailor-made and value-added solutions.
Peter, is that had a concrete reaction at Volkswagen? I mean, concretely, longer term, more different partnership models in light of these kinds of disruptions? Are you moving in that direction?
Well, as I have shown it, we see that the situation will not get improved or will not be much better in the next future. That's why we have to stop reacting and we have to act. And the major steps for this are also, if you have at least your suppliers here in the Mexican region or in the North American region, it's much easier to react than to have from one moment to the other some of the parts from China or to Europe to your production facility. Then the communication, a much more open communication, and really not only one-sided communication to tell to the supplier what we are going to do, but also to find it out what the supplier can deliver to us. It's like that in earlier we have made a plan what we are going to cook, and for that you have your recipe. At the moment we are cooking that what we have as different substances there from what you can cook something, and you are searching what kind of recipe can I do out of it. And for this you need very strongly your suppliers, and the flexibility all over in the transportation area. And one of this flexibility what we have, and we see every day in Veracruz, for example, these changes, what we have to do, unfortunately, to keep the production running, it moves the coverage of our different parts every day into another direction. So it can happen that today I say the next vessel what comes in, it's not critical at all, but then overnight we have some impact, and this vessel will be extremely critical because we have those parts which are still needed to be able to produce that everything what we have set up. And this might, you might think that it's chaotic what is running, and then maybe someone could think from outside of it they don't know what they do, but this is unfortunately always the reaction on that, to keep that target, keep production running, keep products there. We have seen all the dealers, they are without cars, so you are fighting really for every car what you can just produce, because there is a demand on the market, but we cannot really produce. And the demand is changing as well, because many times the customers say also, okay, if there is a car, I'm taking out a little bit out of my wish list, but at least there is a car what we can buy.
So again, what can we enable with this extreme flexibility? It's been kind of alluded to, and Peter in his presentation said as well, we need to move from reactive to more proactive and active modes. Perhaps there's some digitalization topics in there, but I wanted to turn to you first, Roberta, in terms of what Continental is doing to become more proactive. We established we've done a lot to become reactive as by necessity. What steps are you taking in your logistics to become more proactive?
I think it's linked to the point you just mentioned in the beginning. We have so many data available, and now we are how we can think smarter, how we can use those data. So I think we were not at all prepared to be predictive. Systems, statistics, things like that, but it's a way to go. So we have some experts working in this kind of things, not only digitalization, but what can I do with figures? What can I can I build to be better? So we have a lot of technology behind to getting there. But the task is clear. We need to be productive with our customers and also with our partners.
And if you were to just to come back to you for a moment on that, Roberta, do you work? Do you have a TMS at Continental? Do you work with your providers for a TMS or a mix of systems?
Yeah, currently in most of locations we use the provider's information, so it's what guides us usually. But I think we are now evaluating a lot of tools. Okay, how can I have more transparency? How can I deal with the data? Which system can I implement? But currently, forwarders information mainly.
So both Honorio and Patricia, you've highlighted the importance and the investments you want to put into this area. So starting with you, Honorio, tell us a little bit about what your strategy looks like to create this more predictive supply chain. And is it largely from your own systems? Is it integration across? Because as we hear, it's going to be a mixed picture, right? I don't think it's one size fits all.
Correct. So full connection, I was telling you before, instead of connection, we have a disconnection, because there is this nice interfaces between the material vendors and the OEMs or the T1, but the 3PLs were left out, so there is no connection in between. And precisely that last point, that last mile, it's executed by us, by the 3PL, and while there is no connection, you cannot react quickly. Now it's a bunch of data that we need to process in a very short time and then take some decisions. So that's a key thing to go for that. I'm insisting pretty much on that because I'm passionate about it. For the customers that we implemented, it's a whole different story on the decision making, on the visibility. Of course, the other thing that Hellmann is working is on the smart visibility devices for real-time tracking. It doesn't work everywhere in the world. Like, there are some regions which does not make sense, because when we talk to customers, yes, I want it for everywhere, but it cost-wise it's not worth it, and it's not necessary everywhere in the world. Like if you're talking about a trucking from Mexico into the US for security reasons, and of course it's definitely worth it to look at those. So we're investing in those, and also those smart visibility devices to be connected as well to the system, so you don't have to log into a portal or digging for information. And again, I will insist pretty much on part of this predictability is the acknowledgement for the users that there are some facts in the world, simple facts that not because of COVID or the war or whatever, they've been there always. Like you still hear some planners, I want you to pick up my material on December 25th in Germany or somewhere in Europe. It's like everyone is closed. I told you 6 weeks ahead. So this active listening from OEMs and Tier 1s, it's now helping out and leading us that way.
But Patricia, what tools do you see as most important to help manufacturers become more predictive?
We believe in the power of data, right? And we think that the platforms that provide visibility provide this data, but data does not become an insight if you're not able to correlate this data with further trends on what you can observe in the extension of a supply chain. So what we really believe is to have these platforms and this visibility on all the points across the supply chain, but also tie them up with supply chain processes and orchestration. And this is where we see the power of this information rising up in the organization for more smart decision making process from the end. And what also we have been able to identify is that you would expect that sometimes the gap or there's lack of connectivity between the OEM and the provider or the Tier 1, but sometimes within their own premises, the companies are not so interconnected, and you have one piece of the reality, and perhaps the demand of a new sales channel is not connected, and this will create an additional request for the vendor, right? So we believe on both, on developing the technology, but also on creating these control towers and these services that will allow the data to become intelligence towards supply chains.
Peter, you highlighted control tower as one of the areas of focus. Is that something that's now being implemented, or are you working on providers on? Is it a single one, or can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It is a huge construction field for the future. We see an extremely strong demand, as everybody is speaking about it. This is a part of the resilience. This is how you can make really much stronger your logistics area when you already can predict something, what will happen. And then maybe instead of just reacting on it immediately or early enough to make the right steps out of it. We have a lot of data. We have many service providers that they are doing transportation, and then they are having a part of our supply chain. It's very complex, and they all have their own data and their own visibility. But to put them all together and to have a roof over it, first of all, to get, as a first step, to have a total visibility, this will be our first target. We are still not there. I'm still searching for that, how we can achieve it. And this is for maritime, this is for the transportation on land, it is the transportation also in air. So to put all that together, it's very difficult. There are some good examples already where you can see that they are OEMs and they are also companies that they have achieved it, also out of the automotive industry. But this is our first target, and then this will not stop. As I said, until that there are different levels, and the highest level that is really a prediction. Then you are just like making a model how the weather forecast is going to be. You look how the weather will look like in 3 days time. It will be the same with the supply chain. How will look my supply chain in 3 days time? And we have to work on it, but unfortunately we are not that far as I wish it for me.
Well, there's certainly some partners here I think would like to support, so I'm sure we can make some of that progress. Any questions from the audience that we'd like to raise to the panel? I know we're running slightly over, but we started a bit late. Okay, I want to just pick up on some of the points Peter made on the transition to electrification, the complexity that's involved, and get a sense from the other panelists what that may mean for them, or you see that meaning for you. Starting with you, Roberta, Continental. Is it already changing the way you plan aspects of your supply chain? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, Continental also would like to invest, or is investing a lot in developing mobility. So, as the presentation before that, we saw, okay, the number of semiconductors we have in a car have changed, so the way we handle the supply chain in a daily basis faster has changed either. And for the future, I guess, it's something we will achieve for sure. How we can combine this mobility. We have the batteries topic. We have the waste, how we are going to manage that. And I think for the future, Continental wants to see the whole supply chain sustainability. And not only what we are doing, but who we are working with, what they are doing, what happens with a car, with the parts when I'm not using the car anymore. So since the beginning, we are creating a concept. We have to think how it's going to end. So I think it's the future of our industry.
But Patricia, from Maersk's point of view, I think it's a quite important topic globally. Yeah. And so interested how you're already planning, preparing that in the region you're responsible for.
We foresee that this transition will have huge implications, and we'll have OEMs running in two parallel, at the same time, two parallel supply chains, so the internal combustion engine and then the electrical one. And you would assume that the electrical one would be simpler, but not at all, and Peter was commenting in a different forum about more parts and fragmentation of the supply chain. So doing it in tandem will still face the OEMs with fragmentation, with supply chain congestions, and with a different level of standards and specialties or technical ways of storing or of handling and transporting these goods. So the way that we're supporting is from the product development and also having these conversations with customers, again, to meet them where they are on this transition, because not everyone will go into that fast-paced, but knowing that Mexico will I mean, there's momentum around the nearshoring, and Mexico will keep being a destination of foreign direct investment in this industry. We are more than ready to support these transitions to ensure that we connect the global supply chains with regional approaches to North America and make and support them transitioning the change going from going into the electrical vehicles. No.
Fantastic. And from Hellmann as a 3PL, are you already seeing changes in how you're planning this?
Yes, Hellmann, it's supporting for a few years 3 major EV OEMs, and it's been all a challenge. Peter mentioned it. It's a game changer, and it's an upgrade in complexity. And definitely, even though these OEMs we are supporting, they were already producing vehicles, changing into the EVs. It's like new shippers, new processes, new products, additional part numbers, and new systems, new everything. So it works like if it's a new startup. So therefore, you need a strong partner, strong logistic partner that is there. And we need to transition, and we're working on transitioning those control towers that currently or usually they would do tracking shipments instead of converting those data, amount of massive data into translated into useful information for the customer to take decisions and to do strategy and so on. So definitely building these strong control towers will be a lot of help for that transition as well, together with the technology that we mentioned prior.
Okay, great. And just maybe some last thoughts from Roberta and Peter, just to close our session. What, in a short, brief statement, what would you most like to see from your partners, logistics partners, here and in the wider market in Mexico to help you achieve the clear growth plans and developments that you're aiming for? Roberta, starting with you.
Yes, I think one of the things you mentioned is that we have a lot of data and what we do with all this information. So I think now we need to be a complete chain, and starting OEM, tier 1 providers, how we have the clear information flow, and how we have transparency, how we communicate, and more important, how we can absorb all the changes and adapt it to the forecasts. So I think this will be for sure the future, and what I expected for the companies is that what they are doing, they are also working to provide this kind of information, clear transparency. So I think we are in the way, still in the way. We're getting there.
And Peter, what do you need most to create strong logistics, not even stronger, but to get to strong, as you said? What's some parting thoughts on it?
All the points which I have mentioned, but thank you very much for your points, because in my opinion this is the most important. We are now we are speaking about digitalization already for I don't know for how many years, and at the moment we are all flooded with data, and the problem is out of it to get really the transparency and a clear message out of this data, and this together with our suppliers and together with our service providers. This is the most important future target, and if we can work together on it, that will be much more interesting, but we are struggling to working ourselves on it and to find a right solution for this.
So we have the same wish.
Well, I hope we can start to make that wish come true, but I think it's a really important point to end on. Although we know it's infrastructure and capacity and driver shortages, all those things, in many ways the data may help us to accelerate even before we can solve, without solving every perfect, without having the perfect infrastructure, without filling every kind of role. So I think that's an important point. It's more in the hands of the industry to control. We had some fantastic discussions here. So thank you to everyone for your time and input here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.